back in her work tomorrow, punch back out. Okay.
Well, this will be fun because it's a smaller group than the last one. So, many of you had this before, but Christy, you only came for the pantry class, and this is kind of taking the information from the pantry class and really expanding on it. So it's a much
Okay.
more in-depth, not quick glance over look at this kind of stuff.
Okay. All right.
So for maybe the one person in here that doesn't know, I'm Michelle. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm the director of nutrition, and I'm a member of the culinary nutrition practice group. So right now, I used to take a lot of oncology patients, diabetes, inpatient metabolic support, but I don't do any of that these days, and I get to cook and teach, which is really fun. So I wanted to do a class on fats in particular because there's a lot of misinformation out in the public about it right now at this moment. And it's a really complex topic that I think gets kind of taken out of context a lot in the public. And so I want to just start with this Calvin Hobbes trick because I love Calvin and Hobbes, but I think it really kind of sets the stage for what we're talking about as a really complex issue where nothing is really as simple as it seems at first. And once you kind of peel back some of the layers on it, you see that it's just much more complicated than what we thought at first. Okay, so to start, fats are really important in our body. They're essential to our health. We have to get them. They're a really potent source of energy compared to carbohydrates and proteins. We need them to protect our organs, right? They cushion our organs from injury. They give us insulation so we don't lose our body temperature. If we don't have them, we would die. They're used to make hormones and absorb vital nutrients, lots of different functions in our body. But I think where a lot of the controversy is where they influence other systems in our body, like our brain function, cholesterol levels, our inflammatory, or like our immune responses to things. And this is a long way to say chronic disease risk. And so that, I think, is a lot where the controversy is. So the part that I care about the most is how we use them. So in our food, we use fats really in three ways. As a main ingredient, you can think about that like where the fat in ground beef, like in a burger, gets rendered along with the meat cooking, and that's a main ingredient part of that. Or when we have butter in a croissant, that's another way where fat serves as a main ingredient. We use it as a seasoning, and a lot of cultures, they use sesame oil as a condiment, right? So it can be used as a seasoning or olive oil on a salad. That's one way we use it. And then the third, and probably the most controversial way we use it, is a cooking medium, because we can superheat oil, unlike water, to really high temperatures, and that changes the texture of the food. It makes it crispy, crunchy, the things we like about food. And this is where a lot of the confusion and controversy is, in that third point. Okay, some of the, I think a lot of the confusion really stems from this. Back when the dietary guidelines first started, they said you should avoid too much fat. And they didn't really change that recommendation until the early 2000s. And as a result of that, food companies responded by taking all fat out of food and just substituting it with something else. This is a theme that I want to come back to in this conversation. It's good to take out things that we shouldn't have in our diet, right? But what's maybe even more important than that is what you're replacing them with. So in the 90s, when SnackWells were a big deal, we took out all of the fat. So we eliminated the healthy fat, but then we replaced it mostly with refined carbohydrates. And as it turns out, that was like the worst possible thing that we could have done, okay? So what matters is what we replace it with also. So up till now, the dietary guidelines kind of got their act together. And now they're saying that what matters more is not the amount of fat, but the kind of fat. So just a little bit, not a little bit, quite a bit different. And there's really no controversy here. This is internationally recognized by a bunch of different independent organizations. Everyone's kind of in agreement that we should limit our saturated fat in our diet. They're talking about the kind of fat and not the amount, mostly. American Heart Association kind of sums it up like, you should replace bad, I don't love those terms, but bad fats with good fats, right? So there's no controversy here. This is pretty much accepted worldwide based on decades of research into this issue. here's a good question. I think a lot of trust with these institutions has eroded because it seems like they got it wrong for so long. And why did they get it wrong? And I think it's a really easy thing to do to just kind of like attack like researchers and say like, you didn't know right. And that's not really accurate to how this went down. So when you're a dietitian, you get a question a lot like this. Are fill in the blank bad for you? Are donuts bad for you? And while there's no stupid questions, it's not a good question because in nutrition, the only things that matters is the context. So in the context of only donuts, that's not great. In the context of an otherwise healthy diet, great, right? It doesn't matter. So the same thing happened in the research. Nutrition is a really young infant science. So in the beginning, they were studying these nutrients in isolation, not in the context of a whole diet. And as it turns out, the science is really complex. There's a lot of variables. There's a lot of outside factors. There's a lot of confounding variables. And since then, they have started to contextualize that research and put it where it belongs into a pattern. And so that's why you've seen this big change. So that's another theme of this talk, is that the context matters more than anything else, what we're talking about. Okay, before we get into it, I just want to point out two things. And the first is that food is not moral. It's not good or bad. Food doesn't have morality like you or I. And the other thing is that the dose makes the poison. There's a lot of things in food that sound like they're really terrible, and they probably are, but the dose makes the poison. If you decided not to eat something based on one thing that was in there, you would have nothing left to eat, because there's a lot of things in our environment, in our diets, that in isolation aren't good. But in the whole, in the context of everything else, it just is what it is. It's not that big of a deal. So what are fats really? Fats are made up of triglycerides. This is a triglyceride over here, so bear with me. This is kind of complicated, but not that complicated. So this is a triglyceride. There's 3 tails on it. These are fatty acids. So this is language you'll probably recognize. So in those fatty acids, we have what are called saturated fats and unsaturated fats. Saturated just means that this carbon chain is fully saturated by hydrogen. An unsaturated fat has double bonds, and it's not fully saturated. So when we talk about unsaturated fatty acids, when we have different names for them, it all depends upon where these double bonds are. That's how we differentiate them. Saturated fats make it really easy to tell which ones they are, because these are kind of, I always think about them like logs, right? They aren't, they're stackable, right? And that makes them solids at room temperatures. These double, I don't know what Madison said in the last group, but she said it really well. Our clinical dietitian jumped in and corrected me on something. But suffice it to say, these unsaturated fats are kind of wiggly wobbly, and they retain a liquid status. So you can kind of tell the difference, solid and liquid, saturated, unsaturated. Earlier I said that there was no bad foods, and I lied. There is one, and they're trans fats, okay? Trans fats are made. They're not found in nature, except for very small sources. That's completely irrelevant. But they're made in an industrial process, okay? You'll find them because the label will say partially hydrogenated. And how they make them is they take those unsaturated fats that have those not fully saturated things, and they shoot a bunch of hydrogen at it, and they make them saturated. So they're making vegetable oils into a saturated oil. So it's solid, okay? And this has a lot of applications in the food industry. It's a lot cheaper than butter or other saturated fats. They're really stable. They're really inexpensive. So we put them like everywhere, okay? And it turns out they're really bad. They cause a lot of inflammation, increase your bad cholesterol, reduce your good cholesterol, all the bad things, right? And so researchers, oops.
I'm just looking at the pictures, I'm like, I just ate that, and I just ate that, and I just have something like that in my camper.
I was cracking myself up like so hard when I put this in there. By
Like,
the way, do you remember that? God, the 90s
Yeah.
were wild. Again, when I was showing this to Madison, our clinical dietitian, I was like, you remember this? And she's like, no, I was born in 1998. And I was like, shut up. Anyway, so in 2015, the FDA said, you've got 3 years to get rid of these in the food supply, and then we'll be good, right? Nope. We're good. So we're good, right? They're gone. Yes, ostensibly, it was a good thing to eliminate trans fats in our diet. However, what's very important is what you replace it with. So where are we at now? Food processors didn't suddenly decide they were willing to shell out a bunch more money and get higher quality saturated fats in there, of course not. So kind of three things. The first is they're kind of using a labeling trick. It's not that they're gone, they're still in there, but if you have 0.5 grams or less of trans fats in a serving of any item, you can count that as a 0. So they add up. Not as much as they would have, right? It's still good that we did this, but they add up. So the question is, what did we replace it with? And we replaced it with palm oil, which on the next slide I'll talk about a little bit more, but it's a natural vegetable saturated fat. Is this a good thing? Ecologically, no. Terrible. Absolutely awful. There's a whole book about it. If you want to cry before you go to bed at night, you could read it. So that's one thing we did. And the other thing we did that I think is really terrifying is we replaced, or not we, the food processors replaced them with something called interesterified fats. I have read so much about how they do this, and I do not understand it. What I think they do is they fully hydrogenate an oil. So instead of partially, they fully hydrogenate it. So there's no trans fats, right? No trans fats, we're following the rules. And then they kind of mix it with another kind of like a vegetable fat or palm oil, and then it retains its solid texture, okay? So it's just a Frankenstein molecule. Similar to trans fats, our body's like, what is that? And so we don't have a lot of research on this yet. But preliminary studies are going, hey, yeah, there's no trans fats, but this is actually really screwing up glucose metabolism, right? This is not good either. Problem is that when we had trans fats in our diet, the FDA forced them to label them. You could see where they were. They had to put that on the label. But now there's no regulation as far as how they label these. And they hide it in the ingredients too. So anytime you're reading a really highly processed thing, soy or like soybean oil or vegetable oil, probably it's an interesterified fat, but we don't know. So prudent advice, if you care about the environment and slavery and other, your health, is probably not to eat these foods because we don't know. Further to the point, we're probably not going to know for a long time because we just got a bunch of new funding to nutrition research. Okay, saturated fats. This is kind of where things start to get a little bit more interesting, right? So we talk about saturated fat as this like one molecule, but that's not true. It's a whole family of different molecules. That carbon chain I talked about, it can be really short or it can be really long. And depending upon how long and short it is, it might have different effects on your body. Okay? So that's, I think, where a lot of the confusion is. Like the American Heart Association, all these other places, just for public consumption, go like, saturated fat, not good. And it's like, they don't break it apart, because like, how could they, right? It's a tough thing, right, with such a complicated subject. So, this is found in red meat, tropical oils, dairy, butter, lard, animal products that are solid, animal fats that are solid, coconut oil, red palm oil. These are the vegetable sources of saturated fat, and a lot of processed food. Kind of like really generally, because it's really hard to generalize this. Saturated fats increase inflammation, increase total cholesterol. Maybe neutral, maybe increase our good and our bad. This is the edge of research. There's a lot we don't know here. But everything points to it's probably best to substitute it for something else. I will say that the inflammatory processes and the cholesterol problems with these are noticed more in, you guessed it, processed food. Okay. So do with that what you will. I love butter. I love everything about butter. I would be the first person to be like super happy that we were like, butter is good again, right? And it's not that it's so bad. That's not the problem. This is a context problem. This is a replacement problem, okay? So we're not saying, the research isn't suggesting that saturated is as bad as what we once thought it was. They're saying it would be better if you replaced it. We're noticing when it's replaced with something else in the diet, your cardiovascular risk goes down. So the research is saying, yeah, it's not as bad as we thought, but when you replace it with something else, you do better. And in this order, PUFAs, MUFAs, complex carbohydrates, not refined, has a lower cardiovascular risk than saturated fat in your diet. Does that make sense?
Can you explain what PUFA, MUFA is?
Sorry.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry. I knew I was going to do that at some point, but it's like just a long word to say. Yeah, so monounsaturated fats we call MUFAs, and polyunsaturated fats are called PUFAs because it's a really long word. Or oleic acid. So monounsaturated fats, omega-9s, oleic acid, MUFAs, all the same thing. This is a kind of unsaturated fat that's not necessary to have in your diet, meaning you have the ability to make this on your own in your body. But in the 60s, we noticed that a bunch of people in the Mediterranean had way better heart panels than we did, right? And so we were like, what's going on here? And it turns out monounsaturated fat, which we get from avocados, avocado oil, olive oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, almonds, nuts, has really good effects on our inflammatory processes and good effects on our heart when substituted for other fats. So that's monounsaturated fats. That's one of the good guys. Here we get into some of the dicey stuff, okay? So unsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, PUFAs, these have more than one of those carbon double bonds, okay? So in different places. And there's 2 essential fatty acids that are PUFAs. So that means we need both of these in our diet. We cannot make these in our body. Omega-3, you probably know, that's one of the good guys, good for our eyes, good for our brains, good for inflammation, lots of different things. Most Americans don't get enough because our diets are not rich in the good sources of it, which is typically like fatty fish. A lot of Americans don't eat a lot of fatty fish. Chia seeds, walnuts, actually canola oil and soybean oil are good sources. So that's omega-3. Omega-6s are very abundant in our food supply because we use it to process a lot of things, and it's just found in more places. So we get enough. How embarrassing! I use the wrong 2. Sorry. I hate that. We get too much. Maybe it's not clear. When I went to school and I studied nutrition, the big deal was the omega-6 omega-3 ratio. Now that's like way up for debate. It's a super hotly debated topic. We don't know. A lot of research is finding that linoleic acid doesn't increase inflammation. They thought that linoleic acid upregulated a different kind of acid called arachidonic acid, and that's involved in inflammation pathways. And it turns out, yes, that's absolutely true, but it's also involved in reducing inflammation pathways. It's much tighter controlled in our bodies than what was once thought. Okay, so omega-6s, not sure. Also has pretty much the same effects as monounsaturated fats. All of these, they reduce inflammation and just improve our heart panels in general. I will say to this, I probably maybe get enough omega-3s in my diet. I try really hard too, but when I'm choosing an oil that has omega-3s or omega-6s, not because of the ratio, but just because I'm not sure I'm getting enough omega-3s for my diet, I sometimes choose omega-3s just for that one simple fact.
Is cod a fatty fish?
Cod doesn't. No, when you think about fatty fish, it's like salmon, tuna, mackerel, sardines. Okay, so just to confuse you a little bit more, when we talk about oils, we talk about like, oh, that's an unsaturated fat, that's a saturated fat. It's like way more complicated than that. Like different oils are just a mixture of all of these different fatty acids. So those different tails on that triglyceride, they're usually all different kinds of fatty acids. So you can see here, actually, olive oil has quite a lot of saturated fat in it, right? That's why when you put it in the refrigerator, it becomes solid. So it's kind of like right? It's just a much more complicated thing. So of the oils here, the ones that are good sources of omega-3, plant-based sources, which aren't as easy to convert in your body to omega-3s, but they get there eventually, are soybean oil, flaxseed, especially flaxseed oil, and canola oil. All of them have omega-6s. Oleic acid, these are the omega-9s, are right here. So like olive oil, we think about olive oil as being a really good source of that. Canola oil is pretty similar, right, to olive oil. What's not listed on here is avocado oil, which is kind of unfortunate for this chart, and that's almost like the almost identical to olive oil. So you would expect them to react the same in your body and have the same effects, and they do. But oils are a lot more than just fats, okay? So oils contain antioxidants like vitamin E, which is the most potent antioxidant that we know of and essential to your body. But they also contain polyphenols, and these are exclusive to vegetable-based foods. These are plant biomolecules that have an influence on our body. And this is truly the edge of nutrition research. We have identified like over 8,000, but we don't know all of their mechanisms. We don't know how they work or how they act within each other. But we do know that they're good. Like we do know if you get more of these in your diet, you do better. But it's kind of the edge of the research. So I think it's important to put MUFAs and PUFAs that tend to have higher sources of antioxidants and polyphenols into that perspective. You're not going to get all of these with saturated fat. So I think some of these qualities related to oils are really related to this, but we just don't know because we're on the edge of this. So I think a reasonable thing to do in your diet is to choose something that might have a higher amount of antioxidants and a higher amount of polyphenols. And I think this is where a lot of the controversy in our fats kind of starts. So I want to explain it just really quickly. So first you need to get the oil out of the nut or the seed, right? And you can do that in two ways, with mechanical extraction or with chemicals. So in a mechanical extraction, it's just what it sounds like. You're like squeezing or pressing a nut or a seed to get the oil out. It's not as efficient as using chemicals. So you pay a little bit more for these. And when you do it in a controlled temperature environment, when it gets kind of cold, that's what a cold pressed oil is. All of these polyphenols, these antioxidants, are heat labeled, which means if you apply heat, they break down and go away. So a cold pressed, mechanically extracted oil is your best bet to have a higher amount of polyphenols when it comes to extraction. Now, solvent extraction is when hexane is used to get oil out of seeds. This is the seed oil people talk about this a lot, and they say, like, hexane is bad. And, like, I'm not going to argue with that. Like, hexane is a neurotoxin. But it's also extremely volatile, which means it goes away very quickly. And it's also really tightly controlled in the industry because it is not safe. So they're saying, like, you could have, like, remnants of hexane, in your food. And yeah, that's absolutely possible, but you will get about 1,000 times more by pumping your own gas. So, should you avoid chemically extracted oils? I think that's up to you. I don't see a terribly huge problem with them in small amounts, and they're easy to find other oils. So, do it that way, you will. As far as refinement, this is the second step. We got the oil out and now we need to do something with it. Refinement is taking away impurities in the oil and making the oil more shelf stable and making it have a different use, right? So some people say, like, smoke point of oil, how hot you can cook with an oil, is related to its fatty acid profile, but that's not true. It's actually really closely related to its refinement. So neutral high heat oils are pretty much by definition refined oils. Okay, so is that a good or a bad thing? I think it depends what you do with it more than anything else. A virgin oil means yes or no. Were you refined or were you not? Are you a virgin or are you not? So a virgin oil didn't undergo refinement. So if you're looking for something that has a greater amount of polyphenols and antioxidants and nutrients, a virgin oil would be it because it didn't get everything stripped out of it. Extra virgin just means it's of a higher quality. It has nothing to do with it being more virgin. It just means it probably tastes better. It's probably less likely to go rancid quickly. And organic has nothing to do with either. That just has everything to do with how the fruit or the seeds or the nuts were grown.
Does the USDA oversee like the mechanical and solvent or putting that hexane in it?
Absolutely. It's a really tightly controlled thing because, it's a worker safety thing also. So yeah, it's really tightly controlled. They're working to get other, processes that are just better and in some places use them. Mostly these oils you're gonna see are like the ones that are like commercially used. A lot, for processed foods and that kind of thing. They're almost certainly using those oils. It's pretty easy to find other oils, like the mechanically extracted oils. You can kind of look through these bottles and see. They might say Expeller Crest, they might say something else, but it's really not hard. But for sure in commercial settings, that's what they're using. Another reason not to eat processed food. Do you have any more questions? Oh, Winnie asked a good question. I meant to point this out before. But like this olive oil here, like extra light taste, this is a little bit of a trick by the food manufacturers because they'll put like light olive oil on bottles and you're like, what is this, diet olive oil? Perfect. And like, it's not what it is. That really means that it's been refined because it has, and they're trying to advertise and upsell its refinement. Like, oh, it's a light olive oil. And it's light in color and it's light in flavor, which absolutely means it was refined. Maybe that's not a bad thing for you in whatever you're making at that time, but that's what it means. So here's where we get into some seed oil stuff. Okay. Omega-6s, PUFAs, linoleic acid are absolutely more likely to oxidize than a MUFA or a saturated fat. This is a big deal. I think it depends on the context. When you reheat any oil, saturated too, those can oxidize as well. They're just not as likely to as quickly. You are increasing the oxidation potential, which means, free radicals in your body and this and that, right? Like, it's not a good thing. Caveat, MUFAs and PUFAs have a lot more antioxidants, have things in them that other ones don't, that protects them. The real problem is not what's happening in your home if you're using your oils appropriately, and I'll go through some more of that. I think where the bigger problem really lies is in these like Frankenstein oils. I've worked in a lot of restaurants, and there is no reason to believe that any restaurant ever is being responsible with their oils, even the nice ones, because they're pushing those oils until they're broke. And this reheating up and down is what causes the real free radicals to come out. So talking about restaurant industry scale fried foods, that I think is super problematic, and I think the oils themselves, the PUFAs, are not bad. In fact, they're quite healthful, but they're being abused.
Do you know how much oil is absorbed in your skin? Like you mix it with essential oils, how much of that is absorbed?
Like into your body? I don't think it makes it, I know that it doesn't make it to your digestive tract, but I am not a dermatologist and I can't answer that other question.
Like it wouldn't affect your cholesterol?
Absolutely not.
Like
No, there's
bad-
no functionality for that, no. Mm-mm. I do know that PUFAs are excellent for that, right?
What are?
PUFAs, right? They're like a lot of cosmetics and that kind of thing. They're really great at protecting the lipid barriers because of their antioxidant potential, but I don't know much more than that. But absolutely not. There's no reason that you would absorb that into your skin. You can, however, absorb vitamin E, right? But the macronutrients need to go through your digestive tract. But there is functions to absorb antioxidants and other things. Okay, so you've probably seen in the news that there's all of this research coming out about ultra-processed food and how it's like really bad for us and everything like that. And they're laying a lot of this blame at the feet of seed oils in certain communities. And I think they're kind of losing the plot, honestly, because I'm not sure what people thought before, but I was never under the impression that like but for seed oils, this was like a healthy choice, right? There's what we call confounding variables all over the place. Like, we can't really figure out the functionality of nutrients naturally occurring in foods. Do you think we have that figured out? No. No. So, oh my God, junk food is bad for you. Yeah, of course it is. It always has been. It always has been. And I don't think that eliminating seed oils and finding a really safe alternative to them in the food supply would make them any better. And like, further to the point, I don't think that it's always necessary. We always do this in nutrition. When we talk about something bad, we villainize the bad thing. It's always something. But I think that we don't do a good job of flipping the script. It's also what isn't there. Yes, this is bad, but what isn't there? And what's the opportunity cost of eating this over that? So, PUFAs need to be handled with care. All oils need to be handled with care. You need to respect your oils and know how they work. So oxidation is caused by light, heat, and oxygen. Whitney has in front of her, I don't actually recommend you do this because it's super gross, has a little jar full of rancid oil. This is like a fully oxidized, well, just waft, don't take a big sniff of it, it's gross. Yeah, it smells like turpentine.
No, I smell it.
Yeah, that was in my pantry, that's so embarrassing. But to recognize the smell of it, it kind of smells like crayons or like wet cardboard or like paint thinner. So like, obviously you're not gonna use that if you find it in your pantry, but like maybe you get a waft of something that was kind of like that note and then you would know not to use it, right? So because that is literally just like free radicals. It's literally what's happening. So I buy all of my oil in dark bottles and in tin. And if I don't, they go right into a cupboard that I can close the door so they're not getting any light to them.
How come like canola oil isn't in the dark?
So
Isn't that usually clear?
yeah, you can still buy. As a personal rule, I don't. But a canola oil is like by definition a refined oil. So it's less likely to go, a refined oil isn't gonna go rancid as quickly as like a virgin oil or something like that. But this isn't science, this is my opinion. But I think a really good indication of a lower quality oil is the care with which the processor gave it. And putting an oil into a clear bottle is a really good indication that it's kind of like not great. Again, that's not science, that's me. You store them in a cool, dry place, and you never reuse them. That's the big problem with the free radicals, right? I remember my mom used to have like one of those home
Yes.
deep fryers,
Yes.
right? I don't think we changed the oil in like
No.
30 years. We just kept adding more, you know?
Until I had too much gunk from the frying.
Yeah, we'd strain it and we just
Yes.
kept adding more. I don't know what it was. I'm sure it was Crisco, but like, yeah. Just think about that. I'm like, oh God. So I'm like a ticking time bomb, probably. And then for the really heat labile PUFAs, talking about like our nuts and our seed oils like sesame, flaxseed, walnut, you want to keep those in the refrigerator. I put a chart in the handout that goes through the best ways to store different kinds of oils and also the best temperatures and applications for using them. Because I think using the right oil for the right job is really important. So like putting this all together, this is what I do at home and actually also here in the hospital. For neutral and high heat applications, so like you're searing and you're deep frying and you're throwing things on the grill, I'll use a high heat oil appropriately. And those would be like avocado, canola, soybean, olive, and grapeseed. I use canola and soybean because it has a high omega-3 content compared to other oils, and I think that's a great use of them. Avocado and olive, I know are good monounsaturated fats. When I talk about avocado and olive at high heat, I'm talking about refined ones, not extra virgin. And then I like grapeseed oil a lot because it's super yummy. It makes really excellent vinaigrettes. And then for everyday, good thing to do is just good old extra virgin olive oil. You can use extra virgin olive oil for like heat applications, but just not super high heat applications. So just like light sauteing, perfect use of that. And then I like to explore the different oils and the PUFAs, like the different flavors, because there's a whole world of different flavors and oils, especially available to us now with different kinds of polyphenols that we probably don't even know about. So like sesame and walnut. And I don't actually use flaxseed oil at home. That's kind of a lie here because this is something I recycle. But if I had a patient that came to me and had a lot of cholesterol problems, this might be something I recommend. Like if they were having their cholesterol panel was all screwed up, this could be a really good intervention for that because of all the oils, it's like loaded in omega-3s. It's actually, I think, the best plant-based source of omega-3s that we know of. And I think putting this all back in context that the oil that you use, yes, there's differences, but the big picture is the context. And what matters most is not what cooking oil that you're using, but what you're cooking out of it.
Like, if you use a home or a boxed cake mix, it says vegetable oil. If you used a different oil, would it change the flavor?
If you had, so all refined oils are neutral. They don't offer a flavor. But I have had a lot of fun lately cooking with olive oil, where it's actually like imparting a flavor into what you're doing, but you're only going to get that flavor from unrefined oils. So like an extra virgin coconut oil or olive oil. I really enjoy cooking with lately, like baking with. And like walnut oil. I've heard of people baking a lot with walnut oil to give it a nutty taste, but of all the high heat oils, there really isn't a flavor difference. Maybe avocado has like more of like a buttery flavor, but I think it's actually more texture than flavor. That's why it's fun to kind of like poke around and find out what you like, you know, like they're subtly different. So these are my big main takeaways. Yes, we should still replace saturated trans fats with better, healthier oils. But if you want to have saturated fat, absolutely. I love butter. I love coconut oil, but I save it for main ingredient applications. So if I can do something with an unsaturated fat, I do. If something's going to benefit from having a saturated fat, I'll use a saturated fat. And if it doesn't change the outcome, I might cut it back, right? So I might do half olive oil and half butter. So you're still getting the flavor, but I just boosted the nutritional profile of whatever I'm making. So that's something I do a lot too. Then getting rid of ultra-processed foods, always good. Eliminating deep fat fried foods if you can. And if you can't, make it count. I told the other group, like duck fat French fries are like super good. So, you know, if you're gonna do it, but try to minimize it, right? And then just respect your oils and understand how to take care of them, right? I think that's the biggest problem is that we just don't know how to use these different ingredients. And then use a variety because we don't know a lot about these polyphenols, and probably your best bet is to move around to get the best benefits of all of them. And then be skeptical of social media nutrition advice. Okay. What questions do you have?
So of the oils that you have there, you have on the left is